junior high in the early 70s, as I did, you may have learned some actual English. But most likely, if you were me, you only remember one thing about Mr. Clopton. And Mr. Clopton made the fatal mistake of announcing in class that he hated two words. He hated the words bag and the words juice. Okay. He said that he thought they sounded terrible, and that when he heard the words bag and juice, that grossed him out. And when he felt uncomfortable. So if that's the case, do not ever tell 7th grade boys that information. I mean, imagine how he responded. I brought in a bag of juice for you, Mr. Clopton. But Mr. Clopton did teach me one thing. He taught me about metaphors. And we learned that a metaphor is a figure of speech that makes an implicit, implied, or hidden comparison between two things that are not related, but which share some common characteristics. So for our purposes today, a metaphor is something that is known, and it's used to describe something that is unknown. For example, William Shakespeare wrote All the World's a Stage from As You Like It. Now, the world is not literally a stage, but it's sort of like one in that it's important that everybody jump in and play their part when they should. Or sometimes you hear, it's going to be clear skies from now on. Or smooth sailing from now on. Again, not literally, but it helps us understand what a person is thinking about and how they feel about the future. There are a number of other metaphors. My kid's room is a disaster area. Or life is a roller coaster. Or vacation Bible school classes are like boxes of puppies. No, that's a simile. Vacation Bible school classroom was a box of puppies, right? A simile would be it's like a box. Okay, never mind. But you get the idea. The Lord is my rock. That's a good one. That came from Jamie. As we go into February, I'm going to say that I think really that God likes metaphors. Because the Bible is full of them. Psalm 42:1 says that as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you. Or the Lord is my shepherd, the Lord is my rock. That's a good metaphor. Or in many of the parables from Jesus, where he wants us to think about the Word of God going into the world, he gives a story of a metaphor. He says there was a sower who was scattering seeds. Or when he wants to know how happy God is, that when we return to him and he forgives us, he talks about in Luke, he could just say, look, God is happy when you come back to him. But instead he says, there was a man who had 2 sons. And we start to think about the prodigal son, and something that's known becomes something, and understood becomes something that describing something we might not understand. And in the coming weeks, I'm planning on teaching from some good ideas and insights that I've taken from a book written by my friend Jeff Davenport called I Am a Field. Jeff is a longtime friend, an exceptional writer, and a very good speaker, and he starts his book with the simple metaphor that's the title of our sermon today, that you are a field. And if you'd like to read with me, we're reading 1 Corinthians 3, 1 through 9. It's on page 1772. 1 Corinthians 3, 1 through 9. Brothers and sisters, I could not address you as people who live by the Spirit, but as people who are still worldly, mere infants in Christ. I gave you milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for it. Indeed, you're still not ready. You are still worldly. For since there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? Are you not acting like mere humans? For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not mere human beings? What, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their labor. For we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. That's our reading this morning. When you look at 1 Corinthians, Paul is writing to the church in Corinth, and Corinth in AD 50 was a thriving city. I've talked about this before. Commercially and politically, it was one of the chief cities of Greece. I told you a couple weeks ago that it was famous for commerce and for culture and for religions. It had like 12 different temples to different gods and a very large temple to Aphrodite, the goddess of whatever, and it was filled with about 1,000 priestesses who were basically prostitutes and things like that. And Paul is writing to Christian believers at Corinth because the church there is being torn apart by factions. And he's scolding them for acting like children and putting too much emphasis on who's teaching and who they're following. He says in verse 4, one of you says, I follow Paul, another, I follow Apollos, and all that probably means is that if a person came to know Jesus Christ through the teachings of Paul, then for them, Paul was the final authority on Jesus Christ. Now, I think it's fine that you have favorite teachers or people who lecture and things like that, but it's very dangerous to ever put the teacher and their words above the actual Lord they're talking about. I remember when I became a pastor, someone said, never let people say to you or refer to your church as John's church or John Buechner's church. No, it's Jesus's church, of whom John is a pastor. And Paul is also upset that there's jealousy and quarreling going on in the church. And I am so glad we don't have any of that in the church today, right? There's no quarreling. It's very easy for the church or a community to dive into quarreling and jealousy over lots of things. The other night, I read on Facebook a post from one of our friends. Lori and I have a friend who put a picture of Kobe Bryant on there and said, what a tragedy for him and his daughter, as well as the other people on the helicopter. Praying for encouragement. Rest in peace, Kobe. Very simple, very sincere, and compassionate. She does not know Kobe Bryant, and I don't think she even likes basketball, okay? But she was just trying to express something nice. Her post was met by a guy with one of the angriest diatribes I'd ever read. The guy tore into Kobe and his horrible life and his horrible past, and he said, yeah, rest in pieces. We're like, wow. And that led to another person whom both of them don't know, who started shouting at the other over the internet. And this is a total side, but what is it about the internet that gives us the right to say whatever we want and just sort of leave it out? Paul's saying, don't do that. That's childish. It's completely non-representative of Jesus Christ and the church. And it's not just the internet. There was a story, I know my brother-in-law is from Minnesota, but there's a city outside Minneapolis, St. Paul called Lakeville. You probably know, and Lakeville is one of the fastest growing cities in the Twin Cities area. And every year at Lakeville, they have a city celebration called Panaprog. Panaprog is short for Panorama of Progress. Panaprog, whatever. They have a parade and a carnival and booths and races and games and foods, probably like Broomfield Days, only with 64,000 people. And it's a day where everyone in the community is supposed to come out and celebrate their city and have fun. And as part of Panaprog, they have an annual baby crawl-a-thon. This is a race of babies who are encouraged to crawl, and the first one to cross the finish line wins a prize. Well, in 2015, quarreling and jealousy ran very high when the winner, 10-month-old Berkeley Bailey, was disqualified from the qualifier. Berkeley crossed the line as the winner, but moments later, event organizers huddled and then stripped her of her first and only title of her young life. And judges ruled that the tot actually pulled herself forward with her left side and then lifted her right hand in the air. Berkeley's mom, Samantha, protested, said that rule's unfair to babies who have a unique way of getting around. That's the only way we've ever seen our baby crawl. The doctor told us it was a crawl. That's all. The story actually happened. And it's completely hilarious and it's completely sad. But the point is that when these kind of things happen in the church, we don't appear any different than any other group getting together. Our arguing does not represent Jesus Christ to anyone, and when people see it or read about it, they go, why would I want to go there? Let me get back to the metaphor, I'm sorry. Paul is saying, don't do these things because remember, you are a field. I picked this picture. It's not a very pretty field. There's a lot of field pictures you can take, images, and I wanted one that was kind of not amazingly beautiful. But I have to wonder what comes into your mind when you read the words, you are God's field. I wonder what that might conjure up in your mind. You are God's field. Or have you ever thought to yourself, I am God's field? When I thought about it this week, I actually came up with 3 fields that I remember that I've been in over my life. Some of the best days and some of the not so best days. There was a wonderful field that I got to run around in when I took a high school mission trip. We went down to Mississippi. And it was this beautiful, long, broad, flat field, and we played ultimate frisbee for hours, just ran up and down that field. And I remember that field because we just had so much fun there. But there was a part of that field that was by a river, and the ground was incredibly swampy. And I remember we accidentally threw a frisbee right into it, and my friend Bill said, I'll get it. And he ran into the field and it stirred up this enormous swarm of mayflies. Mayflies are disgusting. They don't bite you, but they cling to you, and they were all over Bill. They only live about 24 hours. It's not much of a life for a mayfly. But they're this slender-looking bug with 2 tails and transparent wings, and they sort of like a big old mosquito, but they just cling to you, your hair and your car and everything. And as a bonus, they smell terrible. Mayflies are awful, and Bill was alarmed. It was pretty alarming to Bill, and from that moment on, we all knew that we have this favorite field, but it's got a border. Do not go past that. I remember another field was when Lori and I visited Michigan. It was a famous lavender field. Acres and acres of purple lavender and hills and little paths, and it had a gift shop where you could buy lavender anything, lavender candles and soaps and lotions and pictures of lavender and stuff that I'm terribly interested in. And the field was beautiful, and it smelled a whole lot better than the mayflies. I mean, I remember that field as something that's gorgeous. And I also thought about a road trip that I took years ago with my brother-in-law, and we watched CU play Iowa State. And in the fall, we drove past rows and rows and rows of cornfields, amber and bronze cornfields, and I wondered what it'd be like to walk into them, to crunch around in there. I wonder if I could get out, find my way out. It was beautiful, but it was beautiful in a different way. So when I start to read, you are God's field, I start to have some different thoughts. And I wonder, what does that look like? What does God want with this particular field? What's this field supposed to be used for? Am I supposed to grow something? Am I supposed to grow multiple things? How much work needs to go into this field? Is it valuable? I mean, are there little diamonds and precious gems in the ground? Or is it big? Is it small? Is it swampy? Does it have borders? Can people use it for different things? Or is it fenced off where nobody can get into it? What does it really mean to say, I am God's field? I have all kinds of questions. And if I am God's field, that makes me wonder a little bit about what's God like. You know, he's the caretaker, he's the farmer. What's God doing with this field? What's God's plan for this field? What does God think about the field? And I told you about my friend Jeff and the book that he's written, and if you'll permit me, I want to read you an image that Jeff has created, and I think it will lead us nicely into our communion together. It's from the very first introduction parts. Picture a field, vast acres of wide open, untouched land. It's mostly dirt, dry, dusty, seemingly uninteresting dirt. Rocks litter the land. Some of the rocks are small and baseball sized, with an inch or two jutting out of the ground, and other rocks are boulders, weighing hundreds of pounds, sticking far enough up that they can be seen from a quarter mile away. A massive briar patch lies on the west end of the field. The tangle of prickly, wiry shrubs is so thick that you can hardly see into it. It covers at least an acre, and the briar patch feels like nature's way of saying, no trespassing. Keep out, stay away. A few trees dot the field, but they're not much to look at. Some are so rotted by pine beetles, it seems as though a stiff wind could blow them over into splinters and dust. Others may be fruit trees, but they clearly haven't shown bud in a long, long time. Stumps pockmark the land too, with roots that dive deep into the ground. These stumps serve as stubborn tombstones, reminders of once mighty trees fallen by lightning strike or beaver teeth. And then there are the weeds. Almost every variety of weed. Wild plants that serve no purpose except to choke out any plant that might exist for a greater purpose. Kudzu, hemlock, buffalo burr, and shepherd's purse rise up, gnarly and defiant from the dry ground. This land is ours, the weeds seem to growl. Passersby show no interest in this field, and who can blame them? The field is largely unproductive. It appears to have no promise. It's more dead than alive. That's the field. Now picture the farmer. The farmer drives into town, directly to the courthouse to ask the land and title clerk about the field. After that, he hurries to the bank. Striding through the door, he heads straight for the banker and holds a scrap of paper with the location of the land on it, and he says, I want to buy that field. He pauses and stares into the banker's eyes, no matter what the cost. My hope is that over the next few weeks we can start to use this biblical metaphor in our lives as a field. Let's try to use that metaphor to possibly understand who we are. Three important concepts which are hard to figure out by something known like a field. Who is God? Who are we? And what is God doing in us and through us? And I hope that it will help us get a fresh glimpse of God and what He's doing in us and in the world. And I pray that as we take communion today, that you'll be able to express to God how thankful you are that God delights in you as a field. As we take communion and as we remember His sacrifice, let His love sort of wash over you. And if you can, let yourself be amazed by the fact that He did it at all. Thank Him for His sacrifice. Let us